Hello, and welcome to Tales for Life. In each episode of this podcast, we'll explore a folk or fairy tale from a different culture or region and discover the life lessons, values, and morals they offer that we can use today. Join me on the journey through the magical and meaningful world of folk and fairy tales. Hello, and welcome to the Tales for Life podcast. Today's podcast is our third episode, and one I've titled, Trust Your Own Eyes, Not the Eyes of Others. Now, in this day of AI where we can see anyone saying anything, this seems like a rather obvious topic. But I'm not talking about that, necessarily. What I'm referring to here is more your opinion of others and how you see them. Or rather, your opinion of others versus the opinions that other people might have of the same person. One of the best examples of this is the environment at schools. Someone gets classified as a nerd or a geek or a snob or whatever, and suddenly no one wants to be seen with that person or hang around that person. And of course it extends to work as well. So-and-so is the go-getter at work that everyone wants to work with. Or, so-and-so's projects always fail, so you don't want to end up on that person's team. In all fairness, even some of the worst pieces of gossip have some basis in reality. And there is a reason, after all, why certain people have a reputation. But hearsay and reputations are never the whole story. And if you take the advice from the old Marvin Gaye song, Heard It Through the Grapevine, you should believe only some or none of what you hear. If you do, you're bound to miss out on something, maybe even something wonderful for you. Now, you might not think that there are all that many folk tales on this topic, but there are actually quite a few. One of my favorites is from France. This particular story is typically looked at as a love story, and it is. But it's a lot more than that. It tells us that yes, there is truth to what others may say, but that truth may not be the entire truth. And I'm referring here to the story of Ricky of the Tuft. Once upon a time, there was a queen who gave birth to a son who was exceedingly ugly. And he had a small tuft of hair that stuck out from the top front of his head in a most ridiculous way. The fairy of the prince could do nothing about his appearance, but she promised the queen that the boy would be clever and smart, and that he would have the power to grant this same cleverness on the one whom he loved. In another kingdom, another queen gave birth to a daughter as beautiful as the dawn. This princess had the same fairy as did Ricky. She was given no brains and was very clumsy, but she was given the gift to bestow beauty on he whom she loved best. As the princess grew, her fame spread throughout the land. Many princes came from near and far to woo her, but after just a few moments they lost all interest in her. She could not respond properly to any question asked of her, and she was so clumsy that she could scarcely take a drink without spilling it on herself. One especially bad day, the queen reproached her daughter harshly. "Why are you so stupid and clumsy?" the queen shouted. Hurt, the princess ran, weeping, into the wood outside the palace. In a quiet meadow far from the palace, the princess sat down and wept. As she sat there, a figure approached. She saw that it was an ugly little man, but he was dressed in magnificent attire. It was none other than Ricky of the Tuft, come to see the princess whose beauty was talked of throughout the land. "Why is someone of your beauty so sad?" he asked. "I may be beautiful," the princess answered, "but I would rather have sense and grace than be as beautiful as I am and have neither." "If that is all that troubles you, madam, I can quickly put an end to that. I have the power to bestow upon whomever I love best all the sense and grace they will ever need. You are that person. My only condition for this gift is that you will consent to marry me." The princess was dumbfounded and remained silent. "I see that this has perplexed you," Ricky said. "Therefore, I will give you 1 year to adjust to the idea. 1 year from this day, I ask that you return to this wood where we will be married." The princess had so little sense and desired it so much that she convinced herself the year would never come. So she accepted the offer. No sooner had she done so than she felt a complete change come over her. She at once engaged Ricky in a brilliant and lengthy conversation, holding her own so well that Ricky feared he had given her a larger share of sense than he had retained for himself. When the princess returned to the palace, the entire court was astonished at her transformation. Her conversation was now witty, bright, and elegant, and she carried herself with grace and ease. Princes from far and wide once again came to ask for her hand, but she found them all to be rather dull and not sensible enough. Then one day there arrived a prince who was not only rich, powerful, and handsome, but clever and sensible as well. The princess was taken with this young man, but as she was full of so much sense, she decided it best to take a walk and carefully ponder her choice. As she walked in the forest around the palace, she suddenly felt the ground trembling beneath her as though many people were running to and fro. She listened and could hear voices calling out. "Bring me the boiler," shouted one. "Put more wood on the fire," shouted another. The princess walked a little farther in the forest, and there in a clearing she observed servants scurrying about in preparation for a huge banquet. The princess stopped one of the bustling servants and asked for whom the banquet was being prepared. "For our master, Prince Ricky of the Tuft," the servant replied. "His wedding is tomorrow." The princess then remembered that it was a year to the very day since she had promised to marry Prince Ricky of the Tuft. She had not gone another 30 paces when Ricky appeared before her. He was as ugly as ever, but he was dressed in magnificent attire as befits a prince on his wedding day. "As you can see, I keep my word to the minute," Ricky said. "I do not doubt that you have come to keep yours and make me the happiest of men." "I have not yet made up my mind on the point," replied the princess frankly, "and I am afraid I shall never be able to make the decision you desire." "With the exception of my ugliness, is there anything about me which displeases you? Are you dissatisfied with my breeding, my brains, my disposition, or my manners?" "Absolutely not," replied the princess. "In that case, happiness will be mine, for it lies in your power to make me the most attractive of men." "How can that be done?" "It will happen of itself," replied Ricky of the Tuft, "if you love me well enough to wish that it be so." "If that is so, then I wish with all my heart that you may become the handsomest and most attractive prince in the world, and I give you without reserve the boon which it is mine to bestow." No sooner had the princess uttered these words than Ricky of the Tuft appeared before her eyes as the handsomest, most graceful, and attractive man that she had ever set eyes on. Some people assert that this was not the work of fairy enchantment, but that love alone brought about the transformation. However that may be, the princess promised to marry him on the spot. The wedding took place upon the morrow, just as Ricky of the Tuft had foreseen, and in accordance with the arrangements he had long ago put in place. Ah, true love at last. Is there anything better? Probably not. But the blossoming of true love isn't important here. That's the effect. The cause is what we're focused on. And in this case, the cause is that the princess here made a conscious choice to use her own eyes and vision to see Ricky in a way that was different from his reputation. Did Ricky actually change? The story doesn't explicitly say, but it does imply Ricky's transformation was brought about not by magic or an actual change, but by the love of the princess, or rather, her understanding that the image others saw projected was not nearly as important as who he really was. How does this apply to us? First of all, take the experience and opinions of others with a grain of salt. Maybe 2 or 3 if a lot of people seem to agree, but definitely not a whole salt shaker. After all, there is some truth to reputations or impressions. Heck, even Ricky himself admitted that his appearance was less than desirable. But don't let that be your ultimate decision maker. When you let others decide what you will believe or think or hear, you've given away your life to them because you're no longer in charge. When you start to take control of your perceptions, what you see and believe, what you hear and believe, you become the person you are meant to be. And in that process, you'll also start to see others as they are, and not as people have made them out to be. And heck, even if someone does turn out to reflect their reputation, that might be such a small part of who they really are that you would have missed out on something wonderful had you let it be your guide. Like a Yelp review, maybe a restaurant really is bad at making steak, but have you tried their fish? Delicious. And that goes double for people. Trust your own eyes for the full picture. Your life will be so much fuller.